Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good midnight, good early morning, and good NFL Draft Week, because it's the Pile on Don's Fantasy Football Podcast, and you are listening to our rookie running back show. Did not mean to bust out my best Robert Frank impression, but here we are. My name is Benjamin Nathan Weiner. I am joined by AJ Carrion. You are listening to the Pile on Don's Fantasy Football Podcast. AJ, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm so ready for the NFL draft. It's crazy that this is the last time we're going to be talking about the rookie class on the air before they are assigned, drafted to their NFL teams, before the contract negotiations begin. And then we can really break down their entire profile with their new NFL team, what it could potentially mean for their fantasy production. But as of right now, I'm just really excited to talk about the prospects as a whole, because this is where your like unfiltered real evaluation comes from. And when we did this with the 2020 class, there was obviously the CEH jump by being drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. Last year, we didn't really have that guy that destroyed the ADP by going to the ideal landing spot. But this year, there's a lot of situations where that could happen. Maybe more so for the receivers, but it is really cool because I think we're going to see some more volatility. And I'm just so amped for the NFL draft, and I'm really amped to talk about these running backs today. Ben, how you doing?
Well, first off, I'm doing pretty solid. I've had a long day and going to the gym after this. So if you're with us on YouTube, you're going to see me suck down my pre-workout right as I announce my favorite running back sleeper. So definitely, if you want to switch over to YouTube, check us out on YouTube at Pile on Don's Fantasy Football, and I will get you hyped up for this draft and my sleeper. But additionally, I'm doing good, man. This running back class, it's a little bit poetic in the sense that how running back is such a volatile position and guys will flash for a season or a game and they come and go. And it's a little bit funny how we're going to speak on months of cumulative research and hours spent of our lives just watching tape of these guys, reading articles, film studies, athletic scores, combine. And it's all going to be flipped on its head probably right after you hear this. You're going to listen to this on Thursday morning, or maybe even Wednesday night if we're feeling ambitious. And then it's all going to change. Everything you've heard will be outdated just like that. But the beauty of this is that you need to know this beforehand so you don't make a Clyde Edwards-Helaire type mistake, or even, for example, a DeAndre Swift type mistake if you didn't want him in Detroit. You need to have the valuation on these guys, on who they are as players, before we know their landing spots. So I'm really, really excited about this. I've been thinking a lot, AJ. I don't think my top two running backs could change pretty much anywhere they're drafted. I think like there's no landing spot where my 101 won't be my 101, and there shouldn't be a landing spot where my 102 isn't my 102 for rookie running backs.
Yeah, that's the easy part.
Yes.
Then we get to the rest of this, and that's where it gets really difficult. Personally, this running back class as a whole is a little bit uninspiring to me. I see that there's tons of appeal with some of these later round prospects. Some of them coming from smaller programs, or having ridiculous physical profiles, or having good production profiles but not great physical profiles. There's a lot of guys that check one box really hard and don't really hit the rest. And those are going to be pretty popular picks as you start to enter the back half of your rookie drafts if they're the typical 4-round format.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them could definitely hit, but it is overall a lot of risk taking going on, a lot of hoping that things shake out the right way, because a lot of these guys will be joining committees on the lower part of the ladder. So all in all, I'm not head over heels for this running back draft class. I know a lot of people are, yourself included. You're a pretty
well, I fell in love in the process. I just kept watching these guys. I'm like, this guy's nasty. Like, it's like so many of these guys. It's funny. There's two kinds of running backs I like. Running backs who are studs and you know it, and running backs who are dirt cheap and anything is possible. Those are my two favorite running backs. And what I will say is that this running back class leaves a lot to be desired in the sure thing, but capped upside tier. And I'm kind of okay with that. I kind of like the fact that Breece Hall is the goods. Kenneth Walker could be the goods. And then once you get down to like your RB6 or 7, it's pretty much you're like at the froyo bar, you're at 16 handles, and you're just picking out flavors. Ooh, I like his speed. Ooh, I like his hands. I like his pass block. I like his production profile. And you just let your own eval take you from there. Shout out 16 handles.
Yeah, totally. I'm not a big froyo guy myself, but I respect the analogy. Let's just get right into it. We don't even really have to beat around the bush, but before we do, make sure you go check us out on all socials. Check us out on Twitter at AJ the Pylon Don, at Ben the Pylon Don, as you see here on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube, make sure you go check us out at Pylon Don's Fantasy Football. Every podcast episode, I want to say for the last 9 episodes at least, is up there on YouTube if you want to see us get worked up while we talk about fantasy football. Check us out on Instagram at Pylon Dons, and make sure to check out our amazing sponsor, Verse Gaming, at Verse Gaming on all social media platforms.
And speaking of getting worked up, back to this pre-workout thing, not to be like a narcissistic attention-seeking person, but like I'm really going to be energetic. So definitely check it out. AJ, you mind if I just like get started with our 101?
Because I was about to give you the floor, so take it away.
Cool, because I'd say I'm almost sick about talking about Breece Hall, but I'm not, because he's the only thing I ever want to talk about. 50 touchdowns in 3 years. His best receiving season was as a junior. He's an early declare. He cannot order a frozen margarita. He is the RB1. This is consensus. And I've been thinking about this, and I really don't care where he lands. Of course, there's better situations like Buffalo or Atlanta, but if he's a New York Jet, I want Breece Hall as a New York Jet. If Breece Hall is a Houston Texan, I want Breece Hall as a Houston Texan. I think he's just that good. It's kind of like Jonathan Taylor when he was drafted to the Colts. We're like, oh, what about Marlon Mack? Look how that turned out. I think that Breece Hall is that guy, and I think he can win pretty much any backfield that he enters.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I would say the only team that doesn't make sense to potentially spend a day 2 pick on Breece Hall would be the Indianapolis Colts with Jonathan Taylor. I mean, you've got a guy broke out at 18 with 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns, caught 20 or more passes all 3 seasons in college, averaged the most touches per game at 22.2 in this entire rookie running back class. 5'11", 217, ran under a 4.4. There's a reason this guy is the consensus RB1, and there's a reason we're pretty much done discussing him, because there's nothing to push back on. This is the answer.
The next time I'm going to talk about Breece Hall on this podcast, it'll be bragging about how he's on 3 of my fantasy teams, because I don't even feel like diversifying. That's it.
Hey, if you have the 101 in this draft class, you don't worry about diversifying by any means. You take your guy and you keep it moving.
Bingo.
Speaking of keeping it moving, we're going to keep it moving right on over to number 2 and discuss Kenneth Walker. A little less than a year older. He played 2 seasons at Wake Forest where he was good, not great. And then he ran for almost 1,800 yards and 19 touchdowns with the Michigan State Spartans this year. That type of domination at the collegiate level is borderline historic. The big thing that you're going to hear is the target share percentage. And if you're playing in a dynasty league, I'm willing to bet a lot of money you're playing full point PPR. And the absence of that receiving that we've seen, yes, is it an indictment on Walker's overall fantasy football production profile for the next level? Absolutely. Does it mean he cannot catch the football? Absolutely not. If you watched him at the NFL Combine, you'll know that he has serviceable hands. And oftentimes Michigan State just refused to put him in a position where he was able to receive the ball. But if you want to talk about him as a runner, as a pure runner, he is the 1B to Breece's 1A. And I'm pretty comfortable saying that. I mean, he had over 11% of his runs go for 15 plus yards. Over 50% of his rushing yardage came on those long runs. He was facing loaded boxes at the 6th highest rate in the class at about 20%. Averaging 4.5 yards after contact is crazy. I don't care if you're playing the randomest teams in the NCAA or at the FBS level. 4.46 yards after contact is obscene, especially with how often he was getting the football. So clearly an explosive runner. I think the receiving could definitely come on a little bit later. Overall, it's definitely a 2 to Breece's 1 just because of that receiving worry. But he's definitely a cut above the rest.
There's been a lot of talk on some people saying, "Oh, we don't know Kenneth Walker can't catch passes. They didn't use him that way. He couldn't handle more touches." And the way I kind of feel with Kenneth Walker right now is I'm evaluating him and I'm going into my drafts assuming he can't catch passes because I don't want to set my expectations too high. I'm comfortable having these expectations because he's still my running back too. I think that Kenneth Walker, even if he catches 7 passes next year, I'd still probably rather have him over Isaiah Spiller, given how talented he is as a runner, projected draft capital, what have you. And I would rather be pleasantly surprised if Kenneth Walker catches passes than hopeful he catches passes. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sort of discrepancy is why some people have him as high as their 102 overall on single quarterback boards, and why some people are comfortable taking him after the top 4, even 5 wide receivers, because not being able to catch the football really does limit your upside. I mean, look at Nick Chubb. He is arguably, and I personally think this is an NFL take more than anything, that he's the best pure runner in the entire NFL.
Absolutely. No question.
He won't
Fine
ever
take.
be a top 7 fantasy back because he doesn't really get the opportunity to catch the ball. And he's caught the ball in the past, but they brought in Kareem Hunt to do that. And Kenneth Walker could end up in a similar situation in 2 years where he's absolutely torching teams on the ground and he looks like one of the best pure runners in the NFL. And there's going to be a guy in this backfield that catches passes better than him and probably can pass block as well as him. So there's a real world where that happens. I don't see that being the case with Breece Hall. If you're going to draft Breece Hall, the expectation is that he is playing all 3 downs and maybe you throw him in on 4th down just for fun. So yeah, that's kind of my take on these 2 guys.
Yeah. So that was fun while it lasted because we agree that Breece Hall is the goods and we agree that Kenneth Walker is the goods adjacent. Here's where things get tricky.
That's funny.
Yeah, because now we no longer agree on. We have a couple of players in some flip-flop spots, but we pretty much don't agree down the board. Do you want to start with your 3rd running back, or would you like me to start with mine?
Let's go into mine because
you're a lot more passionate about yours. Mine is kind of here we are.
It's a little bit.
You have some soapboxes to stand on. You have some things to say.
Yeah, it's a little bit further from consensus, but I have Rashaad White as my 3rd running back in this class over Isaiah Spiller. He is 2 years older, which is definitely to note. He transferred from a JUCO in 2020. First season with Arizona State, he comes out and puts up 11.4 yards per touch. They give him the job in 2021. He averages 6.5 yards per touch for almost 1,500 yards with 16 touchdowns. And he accounted for 21% of his team's receptions and 20% of their receiving yards, both the highest rates out of this entire running back class. And this is, when you look at this in a vacuum, there's plenty of guys that are actually decently close to him in those metrics in terms of team receptions and total team receiving yards, because there are some good pass catchers in here. White also led this class in yards per route run. So the big thing for me is that this isn't your Isaiah Spiller receptions where he's getting the swing out of the backfield. This isn't your Kyron Williams reception where he's catching a screen or a flat. They were making sure Rashaad White got into open space down the field when he was involved in the receiving game. And he was involved in the receiving game a lot. He's 6 foot, 215 pounds, which while his production kind of pans out, he might just end up being another satellite committee type back. 75th percentile speed score, 87th percentile explosiveness score, which is the vertical and the broad jump. I think a team could get aggressive with Rashaad White on day 2, and this is where it really came down to Spiller versus White. I currently have both of these guys projected to go in round 3 of the NFL draft. And if they both go in the same round of the NFL draft, with what I've seen not only from the combine, but from the way they receive the ball, I think Rashaad White's big play potential is much higher than Spiller's. And we talk about, I won't get into the Spiller part, actually. We can discuss Isaiah Spiller, but I think the size, the versatility of his receiving game, and the ridiculous efficiency that we saw out of White are just really great green flags. And so overall, just off the production profile, I get he's older, but when you're taking guys like Chris Olave, arguably George Pickens and Jahan Dotson before him, that's pushing his ADP back now. The earliest you're probably going to end up seeing Rashaad White go is the 111 in single quarterback. So he could be falling into the top half of the second round in your rookie drafts. And that's where I think this guy is truly a slam dunk prospect with room to grow and potentially have a higher ceiling.
So, look, I have no issue with having White over Isaiah Spiller because I'm not sitting here with Isaiah Spiller as my third running back and being like, wow, this is the guy.
Yeah, I think this is what
when
I
the 108 comes,
like,
I have to have Isaiah Spiller no matter where the landing spot is because he's a freak of nature and he's unbelievable and I love him. No, that's not it. But I do have Spiller over White, and it's a couple surface level reasons. And I'll tell you, I actually, because a couple days ago when you text me saying like, dude, like I really think I'm on to something with Rashaad White, I went back and revisited a little more of the tape. It's always good to give yourself a fresh look, right? And I liked what I saw. Rashaad White looks great on tape. Unfortunately, I'm not an NFL talent evaluator. And here's a couple things I like better about Isaiah Spiller. I like that he's younger. I like his better production profile. I like that he played in a more difficult conference. And I like that NFL teams seem to prefer him to Rashaad White. Now, those first three things could all very well totally be irrelevant. There are players younger than other players who aren't successful. There are players from the SEC who are not as good as players from the Pac-10. And additionally, the NFL misses on guys all the time. I shouldn't say that these three factors are gospel for me. But what I just am saying is that I feel like there's more wiggle room with Isaiah Spiller. Like if Isaiah Spiller isn't immediately on the field, I feel a little bit better about his chances to one day get there. As opposed to with Rashaad White coming in, has a little extra mile from the JUCO years, a little bit older. I kind of feel like with Rashaad White, if he doesn't come in and hit the ground running or doesn't win a job within the first half of the season, I'll be a little more nervous. So that's what that comes down to. As for Isaiah Spiller, it's pretty funny because he is my running back 3, but I'm not going to say too many nice things about him except for the fact he's an athlete and can play on all 3 downs. I don't love the fact that he didn't really improve year over year. If you look back at his college stats, he put up 1,200 yards from scrimmage and 7 touchdowns, 1,200 yards and 1,230 yards and 9 touchdowns, and then 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns, all from scrimmage. So he was very consistent year over year. But when you look at someone like Breece Hall, who scores 50 touchdowns and ups his receiving numbers every single year, that's more so what I'm looking for out of early declares. So don't get me wrong. Isaiah Spiller is 6'1", 215 pounds and is absolutely NFL ready. I just don't know if he's ready to be NFL dominant. And this is a great segue into your running back 3, but my running back 4, Rashaad White, who I really think has a lot of translatable skills. I think he's an excellent athlete, and I think he's a chance to be a day one contributor. The question for White for me is going to come down to landing spot and draft capital. If he can come onto the field and a team needs more than just a third round back, more than a guy that can get involved in the pass game, but they also happen to have like a need for a talented runner. Like I'd love to see Rashaad White if a team like Houston, who's being mocked Breece Hall or even Kenneth Walker, if they do the smart thing because they're not ready for one of those guys, then Buffalo should take Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker. If Houston waits till round 3 or 4 to take Rashaad White, that has my attention. If the Seattle Seahawks draft Rashaad White and he's coming in to like supplant a Rashad Penny or potentially be the guy next year, that could have my attention, but not as much as Houston, where there's more immediacy for playing time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand the immediacy with Rashaad White. And when we're looking at potential landing spots for these two, Isaiah Spiller could get drafted to a team like the Giants or the Saints or the Vikings, a team that may have their guy right now, but I could be looking at that fifth-year option in the face and trying to evaluate, hey, there's a little more cons than we expected when we're doing our pros and cons about this guy. And I get that he's talented, but we can just plug and play a 22-year-old running back with that can learn from him for a year and has a 3-down build, but may not necessarily see the field very often his first year. I think Spiller is definitely more likely to end up in a situation where in a year and a half, we're talking about how this guy walked into a 3-down role. Rashaad White is more likely to, in my opinion, get drafted day one into a committee and flash enough to get involved. And then if he does well enough, continue to rise. When you're drafting rookies, I understand the affinity towards Isaiah Spiller, but all this 3-down talk, he never cleared more than 208 touches in a single season. He's not, and don't get me wrong, he's good at many things that running backs are meant to be good at. He's not an elite standout in any department. And if you watched him at the combine, personally, I mean, this is just film evaluation, and I haven't really been a fan of Spiller ever. He looked stiff. His hands didn't look as advertised. They didn't look that much better than Kenneth Walker's. But overall, the consistency of his production is a good sign, even though it's not a great sign compared to improving like we talked about with Breece Hall. His size,
I hated his Alabama tape. It made me sick.
Yeah, I mean, he got clamped. There's no other way to put it. Against the best defense he was going to face in college, he was under 3 yards of carry, and he got absolutely clamped.
And I may not be a Traylon Burks truther, but that guy torched Alabama, and that had my attention.
He's 6'2", 218, but he didn't really do much at the combine. It's really going to come down to where this guy gets drafted. And there's a lot of ways that people are going to try and spin his draft position, but when it comes to pre-draft rankings, I almost have to suppress that noise a little bit, which is kind of what led me to White.
So before we because you have Spiller at 4. Before we move on to our RB5s, thinking out loud, we have not discussed this prior, so buckle up. Is it at all possible that we're so sour on Isaiah Spiller? Because for the past 3 years in this class, it really was Breece Hall and Isaiah Spiller neck and neck, being those breakout guys, who's going to be the RB1. And then this year, not only did Breece Hall run away from it like the 40-yard dash that Isaiah Spiller didn't run at the combine, but Kenneth Walker then leapfrogged him as well. Like, is it at all possible that even though Spiller should be compared to Rashaad White or other running backs we're going to get into, that we look at him unfairly because we've been comparing him to Breece Hall for so long?
Yeah, it is unfair, but at the end of the day, it's what have you done for me lately? And what Isaiah Spiller has done for me lately is run a 4.63 40 time at his pro day, which is for me a huge red flag. I get he's a bigger running back, but you've got guys at pretty decent statures who looked quite well, and I'll get into one in just a little bit. But
so Ben, I think we're gonna look back in a year, and I think I'm going to have you beat on this one. I got to be honest with you. I feel really good about this.
Are you talking about your running back 5?
And my running back 6, but yes, my running back 5. Because Damien Pierce is electric. There's no other way to put it. if you watch his tape, his game tape, and you watch his highlights, the capabilities are unbelievable. And his metrics on a per touch basis are as good as anyone in this class outside of Breece Hall. The concern with Damien Pierce is he was never really the lead back at Florida. It was always a committee, and he was always used, unfortunately, a little sparingly. But you just got to watch this guy. Like, I know this is very poor analysis, so my apologies. But his deeper analytical stats, along with the fact that he pretty much looks like Damian Harris with Julio Jones hands on tape, some hyperbole, but not too much, is just crazy. I think that Damien Pierce is one of the best bets to be a value jump. And it wouldn't even surprise me if Pierce eclipsed Spiller and White at some point at the NFL level. I really think he's talented. He doesn't have a lot of tread on his tires. And honestly, like, he's a pure runner, but his hands are crazy. He makes difficult contested catches. It's all over his tape. So I really like Damien Pierce, and I think NFL teams will too.
So let me talk about Damien Pierce a little, because this is a guy you put me onto pretty early on in our rookie eval process. You were pretty ahead of the curve on this guy. When you talked about him to me, I was like, who? And I looked, and his ADP amongst the running backs was in the double digits. People had guys like Hassan Haskins over him. People had guys like Jerome Ford over him. And the thing about Pierce that's so intriguing is that he never had more than 123 touches in a single season. But if you look at his numbers, it kind of shows that he deserved to be getting 250 plus, which is exactly what you were talking about.
Do you know how many touchdowns he scored last year?
16.
16 touchdowns.
I mean, we're talking about Kenneth Walker with an elite production profile and 19 touchdowns. Kenneth Walker had over double Damien Pierce's touches. So Pierce being a senior declare instead of an early declare, definitely a little bit of a downwards mark on him. But let me I have some numbers up. And
hit me with the numbers. The people love the numbers.
Pierce ranks second in this draft class in the percentage of his runs that either end in a first down or a touchdown at 37%. He forced a missed tackle more often than anybody else in this draft class on every 2.5 carries. So if you gave Damien Pierce 10 carries in the NFL, odds are he's breaking 3 to 4 tackles. Do you know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like Javonte Williams-esque.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about a guy like Damien Pierce, there is a similar dialogue to how we talked about Javonte Williams. Hey, Michael Carter was there, and obviously North Carolina touched the ball a bajillion times, but Javonte, the difference between Javonte and Damien Pierce is that Javonte ended up taking over. Damien Pierce never hit that turn. He never turned that corner to the point where he became the 1A to somebody's 1B. So he was always sort of in the mix, but 3.7 yards after contact, 15 or more yards on 9% of his runs, 1.8 yards per route run in the passing game, which is third behind Rashaad White and I believe Kyron Williams, but don't quote me on that. And this is the kicker for me, which is why I have him at 6. He didn't allow a single pressure in pass protection. Not a sack, not a QB hit, a pressure. He didn't allow a pressure. That's crazy stuff, man. He's 5'10", 220, and I think we're going to see him handle a little more work than we did in college.
My sentiments exactly. You're RB5. I'm willing to hear you out because you've never made a case for this guy to me before, and I'm pretty off it, but I respect your opinion. Why is Amir White at 5 then?
I mean, I'll try not to ramble because there is a lot of back and forth with this. We're talking about a 5-star high school recruit. He was ranked the number 1 running back in the country when he graduated. He tore his ACL as a freshman. He tore his other ACL as a senior in high school. But this is not the ACLs of pre-2009. Adrian Peterson put all that to bed. I think he's good to go. But the issue is that as the feature back At Georgia, he never really had that opportunity. But that doesn't concern me because of the guys we've seen come out of Georgia. I mean, he played behind DeAndre Swift in 2019. He shared some work with James Cook this past year. He never had more than 170 touches over his 3 full seasons at Georgia on a per season basis. I just think when you're reaching the depths of this class, White's pedigree, what Georgia does with the running back position, and his production at the combine where he ran under a 4.4. I mean, running a 4.39 at 215 pounds, the number 1 broad jump, and a decent vertical jump, showing hands, even though he wasn't really used in the passing game. Overall, I just think he's one of the better bets at this stage of the position to draw tangible draft capital that turns into something. Does that make sense? I think teams are going to look and say, hey, he hasn't been injured in some time. It's not his fault. He played behind DeAndre Swift. Georgia runs a ton of committees. But as an NFL team, I think there's a real world where one of these NFL teams goes, all right, I think that we've had success with Georgia running backs before. I'm willing to give a shot to the one that was the former number 1 running back in the nation. So I get the breakout age didn't really come to fruition at the collegiate level, but I just am willing to bank on the fact that Georgia knows what they're doing when they bring in the number 1 overall running back in a high school class. And I mean, he's put up an 83rd percentile physical score. So overall, I get the receiving upside is not there. He ran not very many routes in the passing game, but I think that's more indicative of what type of team Georgia is per a Kenneth Walker scenario than it is who Amir White is the football player.
So here's what I'll say. I think that you made some strong points. My mind is not very much changed on this one.
That's fine. And I'm not looking to change people's minds because this one is a reach for sure. This is me kind of liking what I saw a lot at the combine, taking a closer look at Amir White from start to finish as we have it right now, and thinking about what NFL teams are going to see when they see his flashes at a top 5 program in the country that has put out Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook. Sorry, not Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook is a former FSU alum. DeAndre Swift, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Todd Gurley, just to name a few names.
Sure. Here's my thing with Amir White and also the combine. I like to use the combine as a way to confirm what I already know or what I don't know. And I don't like to be surprised at the combine. And sometimes when I'm surprised at the combine, I just disregard it entirely. And when I watched Amir White, I wasn't overly impressed. Just on tape, I didn't find him to be an exciting football player to watch. I didn't see a lot of efficient plays. He's never been an 1,000-yard rusher at Georgia. And additionally, it was funny. You and I were sitting on the couch watching some tape a couple months back. I'm like, this guy looks slow. Looks slow on tape. So when he ran that 4.4, I didn't care because I didn't see it on tape. It's like when you look at Treylon Burks and how no one can catch him in the open field, but then he runs the 4.5, you're wondering, it's like weird. It's like no one can catch him, but he was so fast. Well, when I see Amir White, and I see someone who I guess can run really fast with straight line speed, but he's not fast with the ball in his hands and he's not fast with vision. I think that being from a program like Georgia will help his draft stock and potentially help with opportunities. But he's just honestly one of the running backs in this class that I like less, to be honest. I know the pedigree. I know the injuries. Like, I just don't think it's it anymore. And I'm pretty off Amir White.
Fine. I'm cool with that. I understand that this is a reach. This is what I mean by this draft class is underwhelming. Because if I'm building a football player in a lab, I'm not building Amir White. I'm building somebody closer to Damien Pierce, which is what was really tough about not putting Pierce at 5 with you. But I think it is a bigger stain than we're giving credit for Damien Pierce, that he never took that next jump in 4 years at Florida to take over that backfield. And I'm not thinking of any big names that come to mind when we're talking about players like LaMichael Pirine, who outproduced him at the collegiate level while he was there. So that's just kind of for me
Absolutely.
what it is. I think Zamir White's hurdles in the production profile or the red flags in his production profile are a little bit more easily explained by he just got beat. It was like, he got beat by DeAndre Swift, and then he shared work with James Cook, a guy who I'll talk about in a little bit.
Sure. I'm just chasing the upside with Pierce
Oh,
there
and
because
that's totally and I can never fault you for that. So I
so
totally
if you've been with us on YouTube, you see that I finished my Spider-Man water bottle, which was full of the supplements I put in my body to lift weights like an gargantuan gazelle. So now it's time for me to share my sleeper running back, AJ, if you don't mind.
No, go right ahead.
This time last year, in this very spot, was none other than Elijah Mitchell. I'm looking to go 2 for 2. I'm not screwing around on my sleeper running back. And I'm putting all my eggs in on Ty Chandler's basket. Ty Chandler, for those of you who don't know, is a 6 foot, 210-pound running back who runs a 4.38. It's a great start. Chandler started his career at Tennessee, where he played alongside or behind John Kelly, drafted 6th round 2018 of the Chargers, and in 2018 was in a timeshare with Tim Jordan, who is not notable. In 2019, Chandler was the leader of the timeshare, averaging 4.9 yards per carry and out-targeted Jordan as well. The tough thing with this timeshare was that former Debbie darling Eric Gray, who was a 4-star recruit, was involved as well. So it was a 3-headed backfield, pretty tough for anyone to win. After 2020, Eric Gray transferred to Oklahoma, and the efficient but lightly used Ty Chandler transferred to North Carolina. North Carolina was desperate at the position after sending Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, 2 pretty good running backs being coached by that program, to the draft. Chandler stepped into the ACC and dominated, giving us over 1,300 yards from scrimmage, 14 touchdowns, and averaging a clean, even 6 yards per carry. For context, that's a little bit behind what Michael Carter did last year, but still comparable. And Carter was also in the way better offense with Diami Brown, with Javonte Williams, when Sam Howell was playing better than this year. And Ty Chandler tested like an athletic freak. I feel like Ty Chandler has the size, the testing, and has proven at the collegiate level he can handle more work at the NFL. And I like his chances regardless of draft capital, but mildly situation dependent to be this year's Elijah Mitchell. I'd love to see him end up on a team like the Houston Texans, the Atlanta Falcons, or even the Buffalo Bills, should they not take Breece Hall. I think he can be better than a Devin Singletary or a Zach Moss. And if this kid gets a chance to play, he's going to be great. Additionally, cherry on top, doesn't really matter. A lot of his best film is game-winning or game-clinching drives, which is just really cool. His tape gives me chills, and I really think that everything around this guy, from the production profile, along with his size and speed, I think he's good to go, especially at cost, mind you. Like with Michael Carter last year, he was like a back end. He was probably like a high 2nd round pick, whereas Ty Chandler in your rookie drafts should probably be a late 2nd to anywhere in the 3rd. So getting a guy with similar production and a similar profile for way less of the cost feels like a no-brainer.
Yeah,
and that's my spiel.
I'm not really going to dispute you on that one too much. The big thing for me is that Ty Chandler played at Tennessee for 4 years, never broke the 800, and I think he had 810 yards one of those seasons. But the jump he made as a 23-year-old at North Carolina was significant. 14.4 yards per reception, just to capitalize on the big play potential of this guy. And once you get to this section of the running back class, really outside the top 2, I genuinely think it's anybody's ball game. But when you get to this potential pool of players, a 4.38 40 at 205 pounds after averaging almost 15 yards of reception out of the backfield, clinching games for an ACC program that, while they weren't fantastic, is no pushover by any means in North Carolina. It's a good sign. North Carolina does have a history of producing some pretty gaudy college numbers for a lot of their guys in the run game. I mean, hell, Sam Howell ran for over 800 yards this year. So they're no stranger to producing efficient run game. But Ty Chandler definitely made the most of his opportunity, and I could really see him, if he ends up in a situation like you described, shooting up draft boards once people become a little bit more aware.
He may never shoot up the draft board. He may be the guy. He may be a mid-third round pick in your rookie draft. It'll just be the right pick to make. It's why he's my running back 6. I like him better than Tyler Algier. I like him better than Amir White. I like him better than Tyler Beatty. I like him better than Pierre Strong. I like him better than Brian Robinson, but admittedly, I'm a little hesitant to say it on air, but I do. And I think he's really, really good. And I think that NFL coaches will come to find that.
Yeah, I'm starting to turn the corner on him a little bit. The fifth-year senior thing is always a little bit alarming, but when you're taking guys that late, you have to just go for who is going to get me, who, if on the football field, could get me the most fantasy points. There's fewer, the short list becomes a lot shorter, and I think Ty Chandler makes that list, which is a huge, huge, huge green flag, regardless of any other advanced metric I could throw in your face. So I love the call, really.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk about another guy whose production profile isn't amazing throughout his career, but a guy who I really do think has the potential to come in and supplant a significant role in a backfield in Keonta Ingram out of USC, 22 years old, averaged 5.8 yards a touch throughout his career. He transferred over from Texas last offseason because Bijan Robinson is there. That's not a guy that I fault for taking somebody's job, because I think he is that 2019 DeAndre Swift, where if you're in his backfield, you go, oh, I'm not going to get the ball. I want to go somewhere where I'm going to get the ball. And that's exactly what Keonta Ingram did. He didn't transfer to some rinky-dink program. He went to USC. He took 160 carries. He caught the ball at a decent rate. He was another guy who ranked inside the top 5 in percentage of carries that went for over 15 yards. He's got a 3-down frame. He's 5'10", 221 pounds, caught 90 passes in his collegiate career. And it's not the big thing about his reception profile that is scaring me away. It was like 20-ish passes every year. It wasn't like he did what Brees did, where the receptions went up and up and up, and he improved his receiving prowess. It was kind of like, this guy's there and he might not drop it, so we're just going to keep giving him like 35 targets, and it's turning into decent receiving upside. But that's the type of thing that gets you on the field for an NFL team. If they go, he's not going to drop it, he's going to pass block, he's going to be able to hit the A gap at 221 pounds. But his reception total throughout his career, this isn't to be looked over. It ranks 6th amongst backs 220 pounds or heavier since 2000. So not many guys at this guy's size are receiving the ball at the rate he's been receiving it throughout college. He was not amazing at the combine. He put up a 70th percentile speed score. So it is a little bit intriguing if you want to buy a guy at this size that doesn't really have the speed component fully away, like maybe an Abram Smith does, who ran a 4.5 flat. Just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you.
But I do think Keonta Ingram is going to be a guy that could potentially go round 4, round 5. Checks all of the boxes similarly to the way Isaiah Spiller checks a lot of boxes, but has much cheaper draft capital. That's how I look at Keonta Ingram.
Fair enough. So for biggest running back question marks, AJ, we're actually only going to hear yours because I said everything negative I've had to say about Amir White, who's my biggest question mark. I will say with White, a big thing that I'm also worried about is that NFL teams may overdraft him and he may not produce from a fantasy perspective, but I can drop it there with Amir White.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about his buddy in the backfield, James Cook. Cook finished his collegiate career stronger than Amir White. He put up 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. He has been in the Georgia program for some time. He also played limited snaps behind DeAndre Swift. He has been crazy efficient on his per touch basis, but I think it's due to the type of touches he gets in this Georgia environment. I don't really want to rag on James Cook, but while he is labeled as one of the better pass catchers in this draft because he averaged so many yards per reception, he's under 200 pounds. I don't think he's ever really going to end up in a position where he gets early down work. And if you look at his receptions, I mean, he had a great receiving game in the college football playoffs, but he had games where he didn't even top 10 touches in the game. I get he's a change of pace guy, but like, if you can't change the pace often enough for Georgia to put you on the field and see what you can do, if you are as efficient and are as explosive as all these people are saying, I have a hard time of that translating into an NFL committee where you're going to be seeing the field too much. That's my main concern with James White, because if you look at his numbers compared to Amir White,
James White is elite. Sweet feet on IG. Shout out James White.
I was going to talk about his backfield counterpart Amir White, so I got a little tripped up. But I really wish we could just fuse them in a lab. We could just take Amir White. You know that episode of Rick and Morty where they like age, where Morty ages himself? Last episode of season 5. They go to like the thing and they're like, we'll just split them apart and like mush them back together and it'll all be good. I wish we could do that with these two running backs. I wish we could just like fuse them and we would probably have our locked and loaded RB3 of this class, but it's not that simple.
100%. What? Yeah.
So I just think they're two different sides to the same coin, but for Amir White, I could see his path to potential production being much more fruitful if he's able to run at the level that I think he's capable of. Whereas James Cook, I don't think he's that great of a runner, and I think his hands are a little bit overstated. But again, I do think there is a real world where he gets drafted before Amir White in the NFL draft.
Yeah. So before we get out of here, best landing spots for running backs, we can keep it quick. For me, I think it's Buffalo because I think that Buffalo has a clear need. I'm not a Devin Singletary believer, as I've said. They wanted to address the position with J.D. McKissick. And additionally, they're a really strong offense. So whatever running back comes in will immediately have high touchdown upside, high opportunity for workload, and additionally should even get involved in the passing game. So for me, Buffalo's a no-brainer.
I can't fault that. They're probably my second favorite landing spot. I'm picking Atlanta just because I know what Arthur Smith is capable of. He turned Derrick Henry into what we know him as today. He turned Cordero Patterson into the waiver pickup of the year last offseason. Actually, probably Elijah Mitchell, but agree to disagree.
With yourself.
Yeah, with myself. So when
I think Elijah Mitchell's best. No, it's Cordero Patterson.
So when I look at Atlanta, you're paying Cordero Patterson $3 million. Mike Davis's achy bones are turning into dust over there. Like, if Damien Pierce goes to Atlanta, he's my RB3. That's how confident I am in this team potentially taking a back and him absolutely just.
So are you taking 10 wide receivers in round 1, or does Damien Pierce become a round 1 rookie pick?
He probably becomes my 112. I really do think that if there is a rookie taken in the first 4 rounds that goes to Atlanta, there's a real world where we don't see Cordero Patterson really beat him out for carries, but he'll be there for receptions. And then the following year, it's just going to be that guy because they got a lot to work on. And the volume will be king for whoever ends up in Atlanta from a dynasty perspective.
Can't argue with that. So that's our rookie running back show. We are very excited for the draft. I'm sure we'll be tweeting things and posting things. The days tomorrow, Wednesday, is going to feel so long in anticipation, but I cannot wait. AJ, any final thoughts?
Oh, I'm so ready for the NFL draft. I've been losing sleep about what the Jets are going to be doing. I'm really excited for these rookies to get landing spots. It's going to be awesome. And then we're going to be doing a few rookie drafts pretty close to the conclusion of the NFL draft. I know my dynasty leagues are preparing to do them sooner rather than later. So yeah, I'm just really amped up about this time of year.
You guys will hear from us all soon. My name is Ben Weiner.
I'm AJ. Take it easy.